You're handling the situation wrong. Not because you don't care. Not because you're not trying hard enough. But because you've been focused on the wrong model entirely. You've been asking, how do I get them to stay close? When the real question is, do I even understand what secure behavior actually looks like in this moment? Research coming out of attachment theory labs, alongside longitudinal studies on relationship stability, from the Minnesota Center for Twin and Family Research, shows something almost nobody in the self-help space talks about. When an avoidant pulls away, a secure person's response doesn't just look calm on the surface. It operates from a completely different internal system, one that avoidants are neurologically unprepared for. And the way that system shows up during the withdrawal determines whether the relationship finds genuine footing or collapses into the same cycle indefinitely. Most people never access that system, not because they don't want to, not because they aren't capable, because nobody has ever shown them what it actually looks like from the inside. I see this with my clients more than almost anything else. Someone comes in who is warm, self-aware, genuinely trying to do the right thing. They've read about attachment. They understand, intellectually, that the avoidant needs space, so they give space. But the way they give it is soaked in tension. Checking their phone, drafting messages they don't send, mentally rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet. And the avoidant, who is exquisitely sensitive to emotional undercurrents, feels all of it even through the silence. The space exists, but it doesn't feel free. It feels like a hell breath, and the avoidant pulls further. So the person comes back to me confused. They did everything right. They gave the space. Why is it getting worse? And the answer is never about the behavior. It's about what was underneath the behavior the whole time. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what secure people do differently when an avoidant withdraws, not as performance, not as a strategy, but as a genuine internal orientation that changes everything about how the avoidant experiences the distance. You're going to see why the things that feel most loving to do in those moments so often register as pressure. And you're going to know what actually creates safety for an avoidant, not by managing them, but by being someone who genuinely doesn't need to. You've probably been told that being supportive is the answer. That's showing up consistently, making yourself available, letting them know you're there. That's what good partners do. So you've done that. You've stayed close. You've kept the lines open. You've made sure they knew the door wasn't closing. And either they took the availability for granted, leaned into the distance anyway, or things felt okay on the surface until the next withdrawal came bigger than the last. And you started wondering whether being supportive was actually helping, or whether you were slowly training them that pulling away cost them nothing. Here's the truth that changes everything. Emotional availability alone does not create security for an avoidant. It just gives them something to take distance from. What creates actual movement isn't your consistency toward them. It's your consistency toward yourself. And most people have no framework for what that even means in practice. So they keep showing up in ways that feel loving but land as pressure every single time. To understand what secure people actually do when an avoidant pulls away, you first have to understand what the avoidant's nervous system is doing in that moment. When they withdraw, they are not being cruel. Their system has detected what it interprets as a threat. Usually intimacy getting too close, vulnerability becoming too real, or dependency starting to feel mutual. And it does what it was conditioned to do from early in their life. It creates distance. It reorganizes around self-sufficiency. It starts looking for confirmation that closeness was a mistake. And here's the critical piece. It is scanning the other person for proof. It is watching how you respond to the withdrawal. And what it's looking for, what would confirm every belief it holds about relationships, is someone who destabilizes. Someone who chases, pleads, overexplains, or quietly falls apart in the silence. Because that confirms the story. Intimacy equals burden. Closeness equals losing yourself. Better to stay away. Most people don't realize their response to the withdrawal is being read that carefully. They think the avoidant has gone somewhere internal and isn't paying attention. But they are paying attention. Just not to what you want them to pay attention to. They're not hearing your words. They're watching your nervous system. And if your nervous system is dysregulated, if the anxiety is visible even through carefully chosen calm language, they feel it every time, without fail. So what does a genuinely secure person do? They do the thing that is almost impossible to fake and almost impossible to misread. They continue, not away from the avoidant, not performatively without them. They simply continue being a full, grounded, self-directed person who has not outsourced their stability to whether or not this relationship resolves the way they hope. They make the plan with their friends. They go back to the project they've been neglecting. They feel the sadness of the distance because they're not dissociating. They're not pretending it doesn't matter. And they carry it without making it the avoidance problem to solve. And the avoidant, watching from their distance, sees something they almost never see. Someone who is not being destroyed by their withdrawal. Someone who does not need them to come back in order to be okay. And their system, which was braced with the familiar drama of pursuit and pressure, encounters something it has no defense against. A person who is simply whole. Now here's where it gets hard, because the fear will come. The thought that says, if I'm too okay, if I'm too full without them, they'll think I don't care. They'll see that I've moved on, and they'll let me go. That fear is real. But watch what it leads you to do. The moment you perform need to reassure them you still care, you reintroduce exactly the dynamic their system was trying to escape. You signal that your stability is conditional on their return. You become someone whose okayness depends on them. And that is the most familiar, most manageable, most easily distanced from version of you that exists. Secure behavior isn't indifference. It's caring deeply and being whole at the same time. That combination is not something avoidant attachment systems know how to catalog. It doesn't fit the pattern. And things that don't fit the pattern are the only things that actually interrupt the cycle. An avoidant who sees you continuing, really continuing, not strategically continuing, will eventually encounter a question they weren't prepared for. Not why aren't they chasing me, but something quieter and more destabilizing than that. Is this someone I can actually be close to without it costing me everything? And that question is the beginning of something real. It doesn't always lead where you want it to lead, but it's the only question that ever has. And if they stay withdrawn after all of that, if even your most grounded, most undemanding, most genuinely secure presence isn't enough to bring them toward closeness, then what they're avoiding isn't you. It's the experience of intimacy itself. And you have not failed to do the right thing. You've simply been shown clearly what was and wasn't available in this particular dynamic. What secure people do when an avoidant pulls away isn't a checklist. It's a relationship with themselves that is strong enough to remain intact when someone else's fear tries to dismantle it. They feel the pull. They notice the urge to chase, to fix, to manage the distance. And they choose, not easily, not without grief, to stay rooted in who they are instead. That rootedness is not a strategy. It is the only thing that has ever actually created safety for someone who was taught that closeness isn't safe. Have you ever stayed grounded when an avoidant pulled away? Not as a tactic, just because you knew it was the right thing for you, and noticed something shift in the dynamic? Drop it in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else here needs to hear. If this gave you something real, subscribe. Next week we're going inside what actually happens in avoidance internal world when they realize the person they pushed away didn't collapse. What shifts neurologically, what that moment feels like for them, and what it means for the relationship going forward. That one is going to reframe everything you thought you understood about this dynamic. I'll see you there.